When I originally bought this case, I intended it to be my PC. And unfortunately, it's not, because GamerGuts took one look at it and said that she wanted it. And you know what? I do subscribe to the belief that you should probably keep your significant other happy, especially if you had an option B to begin with. So today, we're going to be building GamerGuts a PC inside the Case Monster Lufer by Inwin. And yeah, this is going to be a fun one. We've got some pretty decent mid-range hardware, and it's hopefully not going to kill itself inside this case. So let's get right into it. Hello and welcome. My name is Wolfie. You're watching GreaterThanPie, and today we're building a PC. Now, for those of you who didn't watch the unboxing, this case is fairly interesting. It's got a cute face on the front, bat wings to hang your headphones from. It's made mostly of plastic, and it has some steel in some key areas. And just overall, I've never built in a case like it. And for a mini ITX system, it holds a very weird combination of hardware. Mini ITX motherboards, but ATX power supplies. Air coolers as large as an NHD15, and GPUs that can actually probably fit some of the newest generation, including some 4080s. Granted, I wouldn't necessarily recommend it because it'd be up against glass. And even weirder, I'm not even sure if that glass is tempered. And this case even came with 3 Inwin light loop fans. So it's a very interesting case with a lot of unusual features. So as a mini ITX case, it should be fairly easy to build in. I've already found some weird idiosyncrasies, such as how I'm currently running the fans. I've already kind of pre-run and daisy-chained them in so that they will not be all over the place. There's actually no tie downs anywhere in this case. So that's gonna be fun to deal with. Also, getting the power supply in is going to be a challenge if it were actually fully assembled. So we're gonna start with that actually. So for our power supply today, I actually have a Thermaltake smart power supply. Yes, it's the same type that I used in that one sleeper build, and that's because it's actually pretty good, pretty high quality for its cost. And it also comes fairly quickly if you order on Amazon. That being said, a modular power supply is going to be the key to making this PC actually look pretty good. And we've got a big old bag of modular cables and a big old ATX power supply that is ready to accept them. So a couple useful features of this power supply. It does have a 0 RPM mode on its fan, and just overall, it's a pretty girthy unit. Now, we're gonna wanna pre-run our cables because it's gonna be held upside down and fan side to the front of this case, which is very weird. So, another thing that I really appreciate about this PSU from the last time I worked on it is it has all black cables and they're not super thick. All good things for working inside a case that has no cable management. So we have at least the advantage of it looking probably a little bit better than it would otherwise. So we've got our 24 pin, which we're gonna need. Oh, and I don't think I mentioned this is a 650 watt unit because the GPU we're using doesn't need more than 600 watts, and 50 watts extra is how I usually spec out a system. And I feel like putting the power supply in first makes sense in this case because then you can't accidentally drop it on the motherboard as you're lowering it in like this. Oh, look at that. Perfect, I can just get right there. Let's get our motherboard set up and slotted in as well, along with our SSDs. In fact, actually, let's do our SSDs first, since they're literally gonna sit right under where this power supply is. SSD-wise, what do we got today? Well, we have a Samsung 860 EVO and a brand new Western Digital SA510. This was like 50 bucks and it's a 1 terabyte SSD. I mean, I remember when hard drives that were a terabyte were $50, so I got excited. Now, you could alternatively, in this case, fit one spinning hard drive if you really wanted to. A gaming system that really isn't going to see much hard production work, this is going to be perfectly fine. The worst case scenario is that Gamer Guts needs to attach external storage, and she already does that. So with SSDs, it doesn't matter as much because they're solid state, they're not moving around. If this were a hard drive, I would want all of the pieces. Just realign the case up here. There we go. So we got some storage installed. We've got our power supply installed. Now let's move on to installing the motherboard. Well, specifically, let's set it up first. So for our motherboard today, we've got an Aorus B450i motherboard. That's right, we're going AM4 with this because I haven't built my first AM5 system yet. But this motherboard has some pretty awesome features. It's mini ITX, it's got Wi-Fi, it's got a decent array of ports on the back. We've got 4 USB 3.0 and 2 USB 3.2. We do not have a single port though for either internal or external USB-C. We do, though, have a nice array of audio, along with a full-size PCIe X16 slot and a M.2 slot in here, with a rather significant heat shield. Underneath our cooler, we've got a wonderful Ryzen 7 2700X. This bad boy of a processor is one of my workhorse processors. It was the first one in the Nova build. Loved this processor. It works really, really well. And that entire thing is sitting under a Noctua Chromax cooler, not the NHD15, unfortunately. But I thought that the NHD15 would be a little overkill for this build and this processor. For RAM, we've got this 8GB Evo Jelly Evo kit. It's a nice RGB kit. GamerGuts has been using it for a while. She likes it. No complaints here. It's a bit chonky. Like, looking at the module, it almost looks like just a blown up version of laptop memory, but the RGB effect is really nice on it, and it is really easy to control via motherboard software. And we got one more. So this gives us 16 gigabytes here on this motherboard. The system's very mid-ranged, like with everything, and that's okay. Sometimes you don't have to build a build that's like the highest end, and I really love how dense this looks. Like, I've never built a mini ITX system, so I'm surprised at how much computer can be crammed in such a small space. Since I have the top removed, I can just kind of slip it in like so. IO Shield is already installed, and I am installing it backwards. This is the way we install it. So we go this way. Just kind of slip her in, boom, boom, boom. And these standoffs are actually set up in a way that it actually holds the motherboard in place, which is actually really nice. You know what's really crazy about this build, by the way, is how much room we've got inside this case still. Like, we can see it on the other camera. We've got room still. This is definitely not the densest case. Like, having some space is good. That being said, I am a little disappointed that the sides don't have an option for ventilation. That could easily have taken this case from like mid-range build to high-end build. Pro tip here, make sure your power supply is switched to the on position at this point. That being said, I am going to cheat a little bit, and I'm going to install our cabling now because I have full access to the top here. Once I have the fans and everything in there, it's just going to be a little bit tighter. So while this is a flimsy way to have the case, man, it's working out pretty good in my favor, at least. I mean, the only thing we could possibly want to install now is a GPU, and our GPU today is the awesome, horribly priced when I first got it, but now much better priced, RTX 3060. And this is a nice Gaming X version by MSI. Yeah, we've shown off these Gaming X cards before. I have a Gaming X Trio currently in my testing PC, Flash gaming PC. So this chonker of a 3060 runs very cool, very quiet, and in a case where it's not going to get that much air, both of those things are good. And boom. We got fan, we got fan, we got fan, we got RGB across the board. And now all I need to see is fans there, good. Fans there, and all the fans are spinning. Now hopefully show up on the monitor. Hey, we did. Okay. That did not take long to post. And she's together, and we're doing some burn-in tests just to make sure everything is working just fine. I did have to tinker with some BIOS settings that were really weird. It had this behavior where when no load was hitting it, it was just turning off, like completely shutting down the screen, the peripherals, everything. And I've never seen that before. Now, I did poke around with the BIOS, and I found a setting that I just simply toggled on, which allows the motherboard to sustainably add load to the PSU, and that appears to have fixed that problem. Gigabyte, I'm not exactly sure why it was off by default, but I did notice that some of the features inside the motherboard were focused around the new California laws that went into place that made it so that by default, devices had to be a specific power rating. I think that is where it happened, but we are running Cinebench, and it's not the best performance in the world, but I'm also not giving it the best power in the world right now because it's connected to the same thing that all my lights are. So it's not getting full power, but it's also really quiet. Like, the mic's not going to pick it up. It literally cannot pick it up. It is super, super quiet. And I'm impressed that it's holding up as well as it is in this negative pressure setup that I have it in. I did go with a negative pressure setup because with the glass not having any ventilation, I figured the best way for us to get the cleanest amount of air into this would be to actually just expel as much of the air out of the chamber as we possibly can. And that seems to be working because the temperatures are actually pretty good. Talk thermal performance really quickly. So this case actually performs pretty well with the hardware that we've already got selected. The hardware we've got selected, of course, is mid-range hardware with a 3060 and a 2700X. And they do perform well enough inside this case that I can comfortably say that you can run this particular type of hardware in this case. Our CPU temperatures were actually really great while running Cinebench. We got a score of 8,875. It started at 66.1 degrees Celsius when the load started to hit and ended at 70.9, being a rather good CPU result. For our GPU test, we ran Heaven, and Heaven ended up scoring a score of 3,316. The GPU clock started at 1920 and ended at 1897. The GPU temperature at start was 63.6 degrees, with its hotspot being 77.3 degrees, and the CPU temperature being 42.6 degrees. As heat started to soak up into the system, we came to 65.7 degrees as the average temperature, 78.2 degrees as the GPU hotspot temperature, and a CPU temperature of 53.2. So in this case, you are seeing that when the GPU is kicked on, it does affect the performance of the CPU. But overall, temperatures are really in check in this specific scenario. The only issue is that it could be better. It could easily be a chart topper, but it's not because of the choice to use solid glass as opposed to a mesh panel. Why don't you leave a comment down below? What do you think of this build? What do you think of this case? And more importantly, are you excited for the next one? If you are, consider subscribing if you're not already subscribed. And if you really like our channel and you want to get our videos out a little bit faster, you can always support us by checking out our shirts, much like this one. So, I'll see you in the next video. Wolfie, out.